Hello, everybody. I don't know. We're just going. I'm still in with that music. It's like PBS. Now, let's hear a small interlude from. Anyhow, grab a cup, circle up. Folks, I have something very sad to say. Rachel is under the weather today, but she is here in the background. So I bet she'll show up in chats and things like that all the time. But she's under the weather. So, Rachel, get better soon, because we all love you and care about you and want to cough cough. Yeah. So welcome everybody. This is going to be a fun show because since Rachel is having cough time, Levi has come on. Levy has come on to join us and have a good time because the topic is going to be a whole lot of fun. We have Kat Self here, who is the lead adversary emulation engineer for MITRE and doing fun and exciting things. And so, as the hacking types like to take everything apart, she's really, really good at it. So welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really, really appreciate it. Meryl, I just saw it. I really appreciate the honor to be on the show and have a coffee chat. So I met Rachel at GurCon, and that's what really kicked this whole thing off. And she got to hear one of my presentations on purple teaming. So I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited to be with Levy, and yeah, just talk to you guys.
Woohoo!
Yay!
So tell us a little bit about your favorite things. What do you really like to get involved with and do?
I mean, that's such a tricky question.
Well, we've got all this Christmas theme in the background, so it's like raindrops on roses. Anyhow,
I love that. So I'm kind of one of those. When I got in this field, I actually kind of came in at a handicap. This is actually my second career. So I want to say probably for the first 4 years of my career, it's been my passion and my career. So like the skills and the gaps in knowledge that I've had personally, or in my roles, I've kind of made up for that on my off time. And now I'm kind of like, after being in the industry several years, I'm like coming off of that and I'm like, oh, there's a life. Like I can have a life. Like snowboarding's a thing. Outdoors, the great so there's this Miscreants has this t-shirt collection that I love. They're just think of them as like a hacker design company that does like a lot of little cute t-shirts, and they also do like branding. But they have this one t-shirt and it's of these mountains and it's of the national parks, but it's got a computer in the middle of it and it's like the great indoors, and I'm just like, that's my t-shirt. So all my favorite things has changed over the course of the years, but it will always remain two key focal points, and that is cyber threat intelligence, in addition to all things adversary emulation on Mac OS and Linux.
Woohoo! Oh boy, we hit a touch point there, right? Because you have all the Mac enthusiasts.
I love Macs. I mean, I love breaking Macs, but I love Macs in general.
Nothing can happen to me.
I'm a Linux person. I will take a Mac over Windows any day, though.
Oh, heck yeah.
Well, and now you have the ability to be able to do WSL, right? So that actually made it where it wasn't too painful to be able to play on a Windows, because I was mandated to be on a Windows machine because we had certain data, like when I was doing threat hunting, I used to work as a threat hunter at Target. And so there were certain repositories I could only use a Windows machine to be able to get into, and so I had to have one. So I would just live inside of the little tiny Linux space that they provided me, and then only jump into Windows when I absolutely had to.
That's basically how I live, but I just do everything Linux if I can, and then I deal with the rest.
Yeah, at the college when we were in those situations, it's like, okay, can I do some virtual machines? Well, why, yes. Okay. So you boot up the OS and then fill screen and...
Yep, bye. I can pretend to be a Windows user if that's what you'd like, yes.
Yep, pretty much.
Okay. All I do on Windows is I go in and permanently disable Defender. Like that was the first thing that I learned how to do, was how to disable Defender past reboot.
Yeah.
That was like the first thing, right? Because I used it for all my dev.
So, I mean, you're active in all sorts of things. I noticed that my cohort in crime went to the last DEF CON, and that you're I caught you on the YouTube on that. That was awesome.
So last DEF CON,
Yeah.
I had the privilege of working with 5 amazing researchers that are very well known in the community. So what we did, for those of you that don't know, is we kind of over the course of the year, we identified that there's really no resources for Mac OS, especially for threat hunting and like adversary emulation, right? Like, where's an adversary emulation plan that highlights Mac OS? Nowhere. So we were like, we should really address this. And so what we decided to do is to kind of come up with a hunting workshop, something that was very hands-on. So that way you could actually address some of the questions of like, what is a unified log and how do I query it, right? Like, where does that live? Like, I've heard of this thing, but where do I find that in reality? And so we went through, we did a lot of research. We built out an entire scenario over Ocean Lotus, which is believed to be Vietnam government influenced group. And then we built out a scenario. We did a lot of research. We walked through what that research looks like. We built out the scenario in a technical format, and then we recreated it, and then we created a data set. And then we provided the workshop where we kind of walk through like how you create a hunting workbook. How do you create something that can live past yourself and past one query, right? That is catered to your environment. And then we actually went through building different queries in Splunk and like, what does malicious look like versus benign look like? And it was a 2-day workshop that was such an incredible experience. And we were definitely planning to do it again.
Oh, do you want to teach a class at PIMA? Oh, that would be awesome.
So the goal, you'll notice there's one theme in everything that I do.
Today.
Oh, and it's free. Like, that is the theme. Like, I want it to be free and accessible, right? Because that bar is so high. I don't want anyone to go through the pain that I've gone through to get to this point in my career. It should be way easier than this.
Absolutely. Well, we can do that with a range. Anyhow, so you mentioned Target. What did you do at Target?
Okay. So a little bit of history. I was formerly military intelligence. That was fun until it wasn't. And then I found a new, and then
Don't say.
Right?
There's a story there, but we can't talk about it.
There's such a story there, right? Well, I was on a contracting job in the mountains of Georgia, and I came across a couple of hackers that were doing some sponsored work. And I realized at the time, I was like researching environmental terrorists, right? And I was like, like, look at all this stuff I did, like, hey, hackers, like, look at how awesome I am, right? Like, and they were like, you do realize that everyone can see all the things that you're collecting. And I was like, well, what? Like, are you kidding me? Like, how? And they were like, look at your footprint. And I was like, I have a footprint? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, oh, this is awkward, right? Like, it's a king caught with your pants down or something like that. So I was like, well, we got to fix this, right? So I went and got a computer science degree, specialized in cybersecurity. Target gave me the opportunity to hire on in a security department where I was a software dev, and then worked on building out a metric to be able to evaluate like behavioral analytics that would really capture how an organization's security posture rated. And then we actually patented that. And then I went on to an internal red team. And then I was invited to help mold and mature the threat hunting team at Target, which is already a very advanced team. And then MITRE recruited me from there. So I am now the CTI lead on attack evaluations, where we kind of do these tests and we present them to vendors. So basically, like, here's a bad guy scenario. How do you rank against it? We have them participate in this test. And then the thing I love about it is that we release all of the results to the public. So that way you can actually see how they did against our emulation plan. And then the other portion I do is I'm the macOS and Linux specialist or lead on attack framework or the attack knowledge base. So that's the bio.
Very cool.
Do you want to be my new best friend?
I am
all
always
this is what I
recruiting best
do,
friends.
like every
so
day.
I would love that.
That is cool. That's a whole lot of fun. You obviously have to enjoy your work.
I enjoy it so much. It's hard to stop. Honestly, you know what it is? We have so many, like, right?
I got yelled at every day at work for this exact thing.
It's tricky though, right? Because you really do have to have balance to be effective. Like there is
Oh,
something that is very, when you are intentional about your work and you're also intentional about your rest, you can actually accelerate faster, further. But for this community, the thing that I love about it is that it's actually not as big as you think. And the people are actually very kind and super open. And it's a smaller group, but like when you're in it, like, and it's not even hard to get in it because like we're super like, please, we need help. We need more. Like we can't be the only ones here, right? And it just makes you want to be involved more because you just want to be around all your new friends.
Yeah, all my new best friends.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome because I'm in the business of trying to help
Stealing people.
get people into industry and things like that. What would you think would be the best solution to help do that, to help for those that want to be in that community? What's the best prep for them?
So is this where I like lead into like how you have a cybersecurity program and help
Well,
pitch?
no.
How, like, in your
No,
experience, how would you convince people to join this field from like the get-go as at different age groups, or like you did and like I did too, switching career paths into this kind of lane?
You know what? I think, I know, sorry, I don't want to just speak.
No, it's totally fine. It's because I always do the same thing.
That's smart.
The reality is, like, when you're searching for what your purpose is, that can only be answered internally. And I don't think any amount of convincing should ever actually matter. As far as the ways to get here, I don't think there's one right way. In fact, my way was a super windy, broken road that led me straight to here. I was actually just talking with someone yesterday when I was giving them my spiel of my bio, and they were like, wow, it sounds like your only requirement for work was interesting. And I was like, that's
Same,
a fact. That is exactly what it is. But I'm also a different kind of human, right? Like the way I work is I don't have enough discipline to do something I don't like. And I know that about myself. So I very intentionally seek out work that I am curious about and I want to know more. And I want to do, like, I already have the character trait that I've worked very, very hard on disciplining in. When I do work, I do it well, right? Like I have a certain standard. I have grown that. I have worked on that. I have watched others and I have cultivated. But as far as the work that work is done well in, I realize that tends to only be things that I find interesting. So
Yeah.
I would just say for anyone that's new, it's like pay attention. Sometimes that's the key. It's just we're just not paying attention. We're just doing it to do it, right? But pay attention and be intentional with what you're going after and allow that to just kind of flourish and find at some point you make it, like I think I've made a decision to either pour water or fan the flames of different aspects of my life. And as long as that's done intentionally, that's all that matters.
Yeah. So I have a follow-up question on that because I know that there are a lot of people who I talk to, and I have a cat who's saying hello, who have no idea what threat intel is because they've never heard of it before. And so you came from more of an intelligence background. So, but how would you let other people know about this kind of this kind of field, not just for cybersecurity, because threat intelligence is a lot wider than that. What do you recommend to do to get the intelligence field more open and accessible to people?
So that's tricky. So that is, I love all the comments coming in here.
I know, it's really fun.
I love it. So I will say this. The thing about intel, right, is, and I think we forget this, there is a reason why you don't openly talk about it. And I think the key in that is discerning when and where. Discerning what is the real point of what you're trying to understand. What information do you actually need? And I think that is kind of where it becomes a discipline, right? Is understanding those questions. So for those wanting to get into it, right, it's actually a lot simpler than you think. In fact, there's also there's other avenues. So for intelligence, I'm going to be super broad on this and super general because I kind of believe the stodgy, like formal classifications of these terms tend to become very muddied very quickly. And I'm a big believer in, like, if I can't apply it to real speak, then it doesn't really help me for the moment. So for real speak, think about a journalist, right? Like, a journalist has to do his due diligence. They've got to do their research. They have to understand their topic. They have to understand, if they release this, who else reads it? What is the impact of that information that they just released? If they go through and they do a documentary and then they release everything, right? But they didn't, like, did they release it too soon? So the company that they're reporting on now knows how to prepare for it. Like, did they release it too late? So now, like, you've already had the indictments and now that they can't use it because they already ruled against it, right? There's so many other factors to take into consideration. And I would use those guiding principles, like, as a place that is very openly talked about to start, right? You want to protect your sources of information until you really validate them, because you want them worthy of you standing up for the integrity of that information. So for the CTI realm, I would say a lot of it is learning the art of discernment. To give you a real world example of this, I actually did a talk several years ago at GERCON. It was my very first talk, and it was about art forgery and the similarities with adversary emulation. And Edward Hepburn was one of the art forgers of the time, and he used to do sketches of famous artists' works. And he actually found one that he particularly liked. He'd do sketches, and then he'd actually go and sell them to other places as, like, we just found these, like, sketches of this artist that weren't discovered before, and no one had seen them before. So it's okay that they were different, but they were so similar in concept and principles that they were like, this must be real. Well, then a museum curator caught hold of this, and he was like, oh, let me see. So he went and did all these tests, and then he went to did a public release. So I was like, haha, these are forgeries. I know they're forgeries because I tested the paper. And the paper,
I was going to ask, because, like, did he use the same materials?
He was like, that is how I know they're forgeries. And you know what happened after that?
He kept doing it anyway. People kept buying them.
Edward Hepburn went and found dictionaries and old books from the period of time of that artist, and then used that paper, and then did the same thing. And then the curator couldn't tell. So that is kind of the full scope of, like, that is the impact of information, right? That's the impact of that, what I like to call, like, that cone of silence, where, like, there's a reason why we throttle that information, but that's where you learn that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because that kind of implies, and I don't know if you know more on the story, that he was using the same materials. Sorry. In regards to, like, how he did the sketches, even when he was changed the paper source. So that's really fun, considering how much art supplies have changed. Sorry, my side business is coming in, bleeding in right now. But yeah, it looks like we have a question from Paul. I'll read it. It's on the screen now. Yay. For our vets coming from ground mobile forces or intel side out, they're looking to try to get into the CICT side. What advice would you give them to prepare for the civilian side of the house?
So we see this a lot at MITRE. So we have a ton of, so for those of you that don't know much about MITRE, it is a nonprofit, and it is a nonprofit, and it is, I love her. I know, right? Producer. Cough, cough.
Cough, cough. Not dying, cough, cough.
Right. But it's a nonprofit, but it also does a lot of support for our government, right? Like, there's a lot of innovation centers. Like, ATTACK came from it too. Like, we serve in the public's best interest, right? So our goal is, how do we take an idea and help it serve everybody and move our world forward. So because of that, we actually have a lot of government that works with us. And I want to say probably one of the things I find the most common is the skill sets absolutely translate, and it's fantastic. And I think there's a certain attention to detail that we get from our vets transitioning that is just above and beyond light years, right? I would say the hardest thing that I've seen most vets, and especially myself in transitioning, is understanding the environment is just different. The care, the concern, the hard and fast rules are different. Like what used to be a go, no go in the Army is kind of like, I mean, if we get around to it, you know, and then like the things that I thought I would think like, well, you like hard lines are instead like, well, we really care about brand, you know, like we don't really care about like this policy is, it's just different. So I would say they definitely come in with a very great skill set, and that absolutely is amazingly leveraged. It's just understanding how to market it to what the business needs are. When I first came to Target, they often told me, we sell socks. They're like, so whatever you're doing is great, but we sell socks. Like in the end of the day, I need to sell more socks. I was like, I don't get this. And then like a year later, I was like, oh, this makes complete sense now. Like
So funny.
everything should be to support this one effort because that is the only reason why you're paid to be here.
Yeah. So I have another question.
Please. And we can talk about purple team. I feel like we haven't really.
Oh yeah, that's right. Never mind. I don't have questions. Wait, no, we got into my field too much. I'm not talking anymore. Goodbye.
Obviously, you got some kudos from our host. So I mean, you're obviously answering great or asking great questions.
So you had one background and you switched into this field, and it sounds like you've worked with a lot of people. What do you think, or do you find that people who come from different career paths and switch into this have an interesting and different perspective to this kind of role? So they might view things with a different kind of view or lens that may help alleviate a larger team's biases for if most of the team has a similar background, for example.
So is the question like, how has that been implemented? Like, or is it?
Do you think it's valuable? Do you think?
Oh my God, yes.
I
am a huge proponent of diversity, not just of gender, but of background, of everything, like thought process, right? There's just the idea that any one group of people or any one group of experience is the right answer is silly, right? Like one reason why we're so successful in our field is because it's a collection of people that just cared. And I think that's like the real requirement, right? Like what does care look like for you? For some people, it looks like open source projects. For other people, it looks like I pivoted and put my degree into this, right? For some people, it looks like I show up with the right questions and I pay attention, or I bake this into my everyday. Like I know a developer that his way that he showed he cared was he started trying to do his own like little like static pen testing or static analysis, and then started to do his like own little pen testing or look up best practices for security and work it with the rest of the team, right? We all show up different ways. What matters is that we show up.
I agree. I guess we should talk about Purple Team.
Neurodiversity. I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's another good point in there is that making sure that the intel that comes through having to be actionable.
Yes,
so
I was just on that.
Definitely,
100%.
definitely always a goal of mine. Sometimes people just sprout around information and they're like, we need to do something, but this isn't actionable yet.
So from your perspective, what's the best way to do that?
Sorry, I read and then you asked a question. I was like, oh, for purple painting, how would you approach home lab builds? Okay, sorry.
For making sure that things are actionable, because you have that difficulty, right, of not wanting to show too much of your hand, but also being able to get it to the right people so that things can defend. How do you work that struggle?
So that struggle, I think, depends on your customer first and foremost and the role you're playing, right? Like so there's a whole lot of different aspects of Intel. If you're doing proper Intel team, that's one thing. It's very different, right? Like who are your customers? If you're doing ad hoc Intel where you're like baking in Intel, like for a lot of red teamers, for example, what we would do is we would bake in Intel into like what we would call throwdown, right? Where it's a full-on adversary emulation. And then that was a different way to bake in Intel, right? Like our Intel that's actionable is like what we're looking for, right? It's very specific malware analysis. It's very specific hands-on keyboard. It's very specific techniques. Like those are our actionable, like that's what we pull out of those reports, and that's what we really care about. As someone that's been providing intel, the stuff that's actionable for me, my primary customers, like on CTI evaluations, right? My primary customer are two things. First and foremost, it's the community, right? So every product that I have, if it's not useful for the community, then why am I doing it in the first place? So then I have to ask myself, what is useful? And that's actually when I kind of go and I start looking around and I try to find, I get so distracted with chat
I
bubbles.
distracted.
You know?
I'm distracting you.
But I look around and I find products that other people are using, other people are quoting, right? Like I look at other reports and I'm like, oh, that was helpful for me as a developer. So now I know what to do. So for my specific CTI team, like something that we're building out is we're actually building out products that we found are much better for like our developers. So different flow diagrams, different attacker life cycles, breaking out steps, breaking out like the actual GitHub repos. And then doing actual binary analysis and then providing those reports. Like those are our products now, right? As far as other actionables, like again, your customer derives that. So if it's IOCs, that's going to be the actionable, product. If
Yeah.
it's going to be more of a strategy focus, then your actionable product is going to be like, okay, this is where I see these campaigns going, and these are the systems that we should probably prioritize, right? I mean, that's going to be one of those things that it's going to have to be catered, but there's a ton of resources out there that you can kind of see of like what's been useful for other people and then to kind of accumulate them.
I have a question, but we really should talk about Purple Team, so I'm going to shut up
I know, right?
and read this question from Paul again, which is, for Purple Teaming, how would you approach home lab builds?
Home labs. Okay, let's be honest.
How much money do you have?
Right. So I'm gonna be 100%
$1.
transparent. Like most of my work will always start off on my local host. And so I will usually always spin up a VM. I will always like do whatever. And then eventually I will exceed my hardware and then it matters again. So for an enterprise network, it's different, right? Like you probably shouldn't have a home lab. You probably should have a true enterprise lab. Let's see, Hold My Beer. That's what it is. Captain of Evil Minions is who he is. He's Captain of Evil Minions on Twitter. He has the Hold My Beer blog, and he actually does a phenomenal job. He did all of our infrastructure for the workshop. So I highly recommend checking out his blog if you're wanting to do like a Mac OS or Linux, or even probably just even a home lab, because he's done a really good job of like writing out what that looks like specifically regarding, VM is virtual machine. I apologize, guys. If there's anything that I've gone over that I haven't done a good job of clarifying, let me know. I'm just trying not to cuss at this point. I mean, I shouldn't have said that. We're live. There's no way to cut that.
Not like it hasn't happened before.
No. And I mean, if you say it all day, every day, like VM and CTI and all of that, it gets really hard to notice you're saying it. So definitely call it out in the chat and we'll try to fix that.
There are some, so that would be one resource I would point you to. There are other resources if you want to be able to start pulling examples, like technical examples. I love threat hunting, right? Because it's a nice blend between understanding logs, understanding data aggregation, understanding artifacts, like behaviors of the actual entire kill chain, or the Lockheed Martin kill chain, which is just like the way an attacker will move through once they're in. And Jupyter, I love Jupyter notebooks. They actually just had a conference this week. Roberto Rodriguez and his brother Jose Rodriguez just hosted that. They're actually thinking about making a thing next year. Fingers crossed. So they have the Open Threat Resource Forge, and it's fantastic. And in that, they have repository, like they basically had Jupyter notebooks and data sets, right? Where you can actually go through and hunt certain behaviors, and they have them mapped to MITRE attack. So that way you can actually go into a dirty data set that has these behaviors, and you can actually hunt for those behaviors. So I really highly recommend anyone wanting to actually get some hands-on work going and checking out those projects.
Yeah, and that's the other part in that arena, and Steve's part of our program. Hey, Steve, is one of the reasons why we have like the range and things of those sorts is that we need to, in our mind, to create some of this environment where you do have enterprise class equipment, where you do have those elements where the community can come and work on. Because if we want diversity into this field, we have to take out some of those barriers from those that don't have the funds, that don't have the ability to have those things at home, and break down those barriers. So I think it'd be really nice to see more of that across this country for all education folks out there, hint, hint, to create that environment. How would you recommend structuring some elements like that to develop these skills and to develop that arena?
Specifically for diversity?
No, for purple teaming.
Just for purple teaming? So
for that whole environment, because those are pretty complex topics. Those are pretty complex elements. You have to have a pretty good skill set to start to jump into some of that.
So truth be told, I'm actually not a huge fan of having a home lab, just because of the amount of time and it's a lot, honestly, like in addition to a normal day job.
Interesting.
I'm a really big fan of partnering on projects worked. Like that's actually how I actually mentor and coach people that I have in and out of my organization, where I coach them very intentionally, like, why don't you go and like work with your management and your development plan and see if you can partner on a project on another team, or what we like to call shadowing, where you can go and kind of sit in and watch what they're doing just to kind of understand it and break the intro that way. Because I think we have this idea in our field right now where if I want to be a red teamer, I need to go be popping CVEs. I need to have this. I need to be able to like have any C2. I need to go do that full time, and that's my job. But that's not actually the way the world works, right? The way that really works is it's kind of, we're all like different variations of gray on these different fields. And so just some of us know a little bit more about one aspect than the other. And that's actually kind of the strength of it, right? That's why you partner with people that have a diverse background, because you know something about networks. You know more about host-based analysis, right? You have like, you're an RE and that's all you know, and that's all you really care about because you're an assembly person, right? Like that doesn't mean we all need to know assembly. That's silly. That's a lot. I don't hate it. I just only dabble when I have to. So
don't love it.
I just don't love it. So again, it's efficient use of your time, right? So you want efficient use. You don't want a bunch of people with the same stuff. So the point is, I've developed that on my teams, and the fact, like, it's the question earlier was like, this is my third career, right? This is my second career. And I've come to find that I can't find anyone with all of my same skill sets to replace me. So what I've had to do is I've had to very intentionally take the teams that I'm on, find newer individuals. I don't care what age they are. I don't care what background they are, because we're all new, right? Bring them onto the team and be very intentional with how I build them out. Give them projects to be able to give them opportunities to grow into something, while giving them the time and attention to teach them and then watch them perform, and then provide feedback that is critical and encouraging, right? And then repeat that cycle again and again, whether they're going to stay with me for 6 months, a year, or 5 years. It doesn't really matter, right? Because the reality is it's the investment in the person, right? We're a community at this point, and that's really the point. So that's what I've done to address it, is I've built up teams. As far as there was, to get back to probably what's really relevant for most people on this, which is like, what are the tools that I can bring to my already existing teams? I love that approach. That's why I do it. I'm glad you guys agree.
It's a good approach.
You have good taste. Great minds. So for a lot of people, like Caldera is an excellent resource. It's very, like, because it's underneath the MITRE organization, we're very intentional about trying to make sure we incorporate it with other projects that we have. I am a big fan of atomic red team tests. A lot of great, like Meryl Vernon actually does this over at Zoom, and I love it. She actually just did a presentation on purple teaming too. and where she actually goes through and then runs through the atomic red team tests and actually works with the blue team on the same call, and they run it together. And so they're having this conversation, right, where your red team can actually be present and tell you what's going on from their perspective. The blue team can tell you what they're seeing. And then you can have that conversation in the middle where you're like, okay, is this a delay, or is this like, or we're just not picking it up? And then the red team can be like, well, this is this. And then you can actually identify gaps. You can actually have these transparent conversations. And most importantly, you can cultivate that atmosphere where you can have a conversation and have that risk factor of failing, right? Because you're not really failing. You're working together. You're actually, like, that's what collaboration really looks like.
Awesome. Love to hear it. And that's fantastic advice, because we've got to get rid of this silo aspect throughout the industry.
Absolutely. And gatekeeping. Please tear the gates down. Thank you.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, like, we just need more people. And as we continue to grow, it'll all come out in the wash, as it's an old Southern saying, right?
Yeah.
From Miranda Lambert, throw them in the sand and mix them all in and it'll all come out of the wash.
See, now I'm thinking you quoted that song earlier on purpose, which is why I distracted you earlier with the link to that song.
I know.
Just saying.
I quote so many things. I have no idea where I get them from. I just like them.
But that's also the other critical aspect in this industry that you mentioned earlier, is passion. Because from the student's perspective, we get folks all the time that come in, my mother's brother's sister, parakeets last owner, whatever, said that there's a lot of money to be made in IT. Don't you think I should go into IT? And it's like, no, you need to have a passion for it, because IT is unique in that aspect, in that it's constantly changing, constantly growing. It's never going to be the same. So if you don't love IT, you really don't want to get into IT.
Yeah. You don't want to be stuck in something you don't like.
And so I love that perspective of wanting to follow the passion and make that your goal. So that's very cool.
We have another question. Sorry, I cut you off. There was a question for the community in general. It was, how can the community partner with MITRE and help out, especially in regards to this kind of purple team threat intel fields?
So I'm sure that there's a lot of programs that I don't even know about that I should be citing right now. So attack is, I'm just going to be honest, on the spot. It is an excellent question. There's honestly been fantastic questions throughout this, which I love. So there's a couple of ways to engage with MITRE, right? Like, it's really more about, like, what effort do you want to get involved in? Like, we have CISA that does a lot of policy, right? We have attack that is super involved in the community, and they're building out essentially the encyclopedia for adversary behavior, right? So we love it when we get contributions into that, especially in the Linux and macOS space, because there's such little reporting in that space for the reasons that we discussed earlier, right? There's that transparency with discernment. And other ways to engage with it is going to be, like, there are open source repos, right? Like, if you're a coder and you're looking, so for those of you that are new and want to have a stab at showcasing your development skills, right? I am a huge fan of encouraging people to be able to contribute to open source repositories that benefit the community, whether it's a bug fix, whether it is a feature, whatever that is. I am a huge fan of that. So we have everything from, if you're an adversary emulation engineer, right, and you really want to showcase your skills, come up with an adversary emulation plan. We have a library for that. Try to contribute to that one. If you use Caldera and you want to be able to create an implant in Swift, or if you want to be able to take a different emulation plan that you have, or create whatever you want to do, take a feature and add to it, contribute to that repo. Like, as a coder, there's tons of opportunities. As an Intel analyst, if you have written a blog or report that actually does true analysis and and is using, the principles of, of discernment, we'll just say, then, you can send that on to MITRE, and then we'll be able to like have that on our radar. There's a lot of different ways, but it usually always starts just with reaching out. Sometimes I think it's okay to be like, hey, here's my skill set. Like, how can I help? That's an okay question too.
And we have another question. And it's kind of in line, which I did post a link, at least in LinkedIn. So hopefully the host and our secret squirrel can post that to everyone else also. The question from Paul is, do you have any apprenticeship programs or DoD skill bridges coming up? I asked because there are a lot of vet mentees coming into their transition window.
I love it. So yes. So for new grads, we have what we call the CNPs. It's Cyber New Professionals, and it's where, and a lot of companies are going to do this. I will say this for probably most of your big companies, your government contractors, they all have a similar program to this. And a lot of times, if you are transitioning into the career, or you're brand new out of college, you can actually justify getting in one of these programs. And what they do is they do a rotation. So you spend like 6 months on different project work. And you do 3 different rotations. And the purpose of that is that they've identified these teams. Like we used to do this at Target all the time. We've identified these teams as teams where they are well put together. There's not a lot of team drama. They're pretty efficient. They know what they're doing. They've got a good cadence. They're fairly structured. Like done is actually defined, which is an entire thing for those of you that have worked in that space, right? You're like, well, what's done? I don't know. I mean, when it's done. Well, that's not an answer.
No.
What are requirements? Like, that's what I need to know. And
documentation, please.
Right? Oh, so they put you on teams where they're well documented. There's requirements. It's very clear. And then you can kind of like rotate through those different types of teams and actually get exposure because they're already set up with enough people to actually train you. Because with a lot of these smaller companies, what you'll find is they just need someone to put out the fires now.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple dumpsters going on. We don't know which one we need to prioritize, but just fix it. And it's like, that's a lot for someone that's new, right? Like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a safer environment to like fail fast. So that way you can like learn quicker and then be able to move on to the next project. So I'm a huge fan of those programs.
And I've seen those programs as kind of abolishing, like I mentioned earlier, that whole gatekeeping aspect where, like you said, if the team's not big enough and they just need you to put out fires now, you don't have much time to learn before you are tested to do. And if you cause more fires than you're putting out, that's problematic. Whereas a fully staffed team that's able to allow you to fail. Because personally, I don't think failure is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. You figure out what didn't work, and so you can eliminate that path and go do something else. But that may be a fringe view. So,
yeah. I mean, we're a growing field. Like, let's be super real here. We are a field, an industry that came from a bunch of people that just had an interest, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at Microsoft, like when they were doing the file server, when they first put out I think the engineer was like, you do realize that we should probably have authentication for this, right? And like he had to actually go and like drop into like the CEO's like file share to prove that like, hey, anyone can do this. We should probably care. And then that was what forced them, okay, we'll delay the rollout because we probably should have something in place for that, right? And I mean, that's where our community came from, was people that were just like, hey, like this is a thing, we need to care about this. And then we have kind of evolved into this community that's evolved into this industry. So I understand the gatekeeping. There's no excuse for it whatsoever. But I've noticed it's also slowly going away as we start to create opportunities that allow people to skill up in a graceful way where they're empowered versus challenged. I mean, it's like they're challenged, but not like there's less proof to me versus show me.
Yeah,
or try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because the one thing about this industry is that there are so many variables, so many things to cover. Nobody knows it all. And so just give up at the beginning and go with your passion and start to grow and develop in what you're good at.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I will say, okay.
Sorry, I was gonna say if your passions change, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Because my previous lives, many lives ago, were completely different. But I'm able to utilize that knowledge in a way that some of my teammates may not be able to because they don't have similar background.
I think there's a lot to be said to appreciate the richness of a human. Like, we're all bringing so much to the table, right? Like, sometimes just being seen and heard makes the entire difference. I was talking with a friend yesterday, and he had actually hired this female on his team very intentionally, not just because she was qualified with a skill set, but because the atmosphere that she created on the team was worth her weight in gold. And I believe in that. Like, I believe in finding that. How do you create the atmosphere, right? Like, that's something that I really focus on, is did I create an atmosphere where you can learn, grow, and thrive? And that's kind of one of my measurements for leadership.
Yeah, it becomes picking up the concept and setting a purposeful culture, which, because if you have concerns of fears or things hanging over you, it's almost impossible to be creative. And to have that creative ability, you have to feel secure. And this industry thrives on creativity. We need it desperately. So
that's how we break and fix things.
Yeah, there was actually a keynote that specifically went over that at a SANS, I think it was like 2020 at SANS Threat Hunting Summit. And I forgot the name of the gentleman off the top of my head because I wasn't planning to speak about him. But he had, his entire keynote was on the concept of play. Like, when kids play, like, if you think about that atmosphere where they can, like, oh, I can dodge this way. You're in the moment, you're fully engaged, and you're not worried about if it doesn't work out. Right? Like, so how do you create that environment? And then you're going to get people, because your brain is so, like, I think he even like showcased like how they looked at the way your brain was engaged, and your brain was fully engaged, and it was totally different. And so how do we get that kind of brain activity at that like scientific level, right, into our work lives? And which is just neat, because that's where creativity thrives. It's if you're at the highest performance. So I loved that talk.
That one's a really good one. I do remember that one. Now that you mentioned play. No, I don't know if that is publicly available, but if it is, everyone should go watch it. And I will go find the link if it is, because that's my secret squirrel ability.
I love that secret squirrel ability. You're lucky. Mine is I'll go and find 17 reports and then never be able to find them again. I'll be able to quote them and everything.
Somehow I have both of those problems. I have secret squirrel ability and also this.
Yes.
Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. And unfortunately, because of things that I have going on, we're going to have to start winding this down.
How dare you?
Which I know. I feel bad. I really, anyhow. But we do want to mention that I hope I don't slaughter the name, that we'll have, okay, I'll go ahead with the German aspect of it.
I love it.
From Cisco coming through.
Wolfgang Goldrich.
Pardon me?
Wolfgang Goldrich, if it's German.
Well, the OE would then be the umlauted, right? So it'd be Gerlich.
Yeah, Gerlich.
But it probably, has
words. Anyway, next time. Also, I gave our
für die nächste Zeit, wir können eine fantastische Zeit haben. No, so, but Kat, this was amazing, and thank you so much for bringing in and joining us and hanging out and having a wild time. And the questions, man, they were awesome this time. They had a whole bunch of folks coming through, and this is such a rich area, and man, we could go on for hours with this. but
Absolutely.
we're just
Especially
so
me.
thankful that you came by and were willing to share and chat with us.
No, I so appreciate it. You guys have been amazing. So thank you so much for the opportunity. So like with my squid hat.
And we really
I
miss
love it.
Rachel. Rachel,
Secret
you know,
squirrel.
better. Do you have any parting thoughts, Levy?
Me.
Yeah.
We do have the last question, though. I don't think we'll get to it, but hopefully we can bring that up maybe on Twitter or something. My parting thoughts is that I hope that Kat is my new stolen best friend, so that I can continue these conversations, because I don't have enough people to talk about this stuff for Threat Intel. So
I
be my
love these
friend.
conversations. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I mean,
yeah.
and like I'm open on like I leave my DMs open on Twitter. Like you can reach out that way or LinkedIn. Like I love this stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah,
I
and giving back to the community is fantastic.
yes. I
That's-
just read Paul's question, and I want to quickly say, everyone join. Thank you.
Language analyst, I would say that is so I'm actually learning Chinese right now, and
wow.
it is fascinating. And
Oh, yeah.
the amount of analytical thought process to actually be like to understand the idiosyncrasies and the differences of that. Like I even in my previous career, we took a lot of written statements analysis. Like what does it mean when you use specific words and then what happens? I
Yeah.
think that's huge in the intel side. Like when you're actually doing research for social media and you're actually looking at what specific texts say, like for example, if you're, I mean, I already mentioned it. If you're looking at language, like what do we call certain aspects, right? If I'm calling a specific malware that I'm selling a certain name, or I'm alluding to the fact that I have something, like what is the coded language for that, right? I think that's huge, and there is a huge world for them in that area. So it just kind of depends on like what area do you want to go into, right? If you're looking at the purple side of the house, like what does purple mean for you?
Yeah.
But absolutely the conversation there to have with your red team and your threat hunting team, like you should absolutely be in the room while those investigations are happening.
Yeah. Sorry, I got us squirreled again, but I like that question. I already messaged you, so we can be friends. All right. I'm
Good.
done. Bye.
Good. I'm really glad.
Oh yeah, expect stuff coming from my way too.
Please. I so appreciate it.
So thank you very much. Rachel, you're in the background working there. Do you have anything you want to add before we go? Secret squirrel. Comments coming out of nowhere. And she's typing.
Comments,
really
questions,
fast.
concern.
Well, you guys are welcome to like message me afterwards with any questions, because honestly, like if I can make anyone's path just even a little bit easier than mine has been, then like I have won by the end of it. Like that's
Absolutely,
like my hope.
Okay, official Awesome Human Being Award.
Aww.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
So,
Alrighty, folks. Well, thank you very much. Everyone, have a great day. And
happy Friday.
we'll see you back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
New hat, though. I have a different hat for every time I appear, so get ready for that.
Awesome.
I love it.
Thank you, folks.